What's going on, guys? So today I'm going to talk about 8 different things you can implement in your fish keeping to just easily become a better fish keeper. And I was really just thinking about things that if I was talking to myself the day I got my first aquarium, what are some things I'd tell myself that would have helped me kind of get a jump start on going from a beginner to intermediate to I don't know what I'd describe myself as now, but I'd say that I'm pretty knowledgeable about fish keeping in general, and I feel comfortable giving other people advice. So here, I'll just get into the list. So the first one, and the reason this is the first one is I think it's the easiest to implement, and it has a really big impact really quickly, and that is frozen foods. So frozen foods, I think, are one that when you first start out, uh, at least for me, I didn't even really realize that they were a thing you could do. You'd sometimes see that freezer in your local fish store that you went to, but you wouldn't really, I don't know, at least I wouldn't really even consider it as, oh, that's something I could buy and feed my fish. But particularly for a few species, frozen foods can be really key. And the one that I've found this the most with is Cory catfish. Cory catfish love frozen bloodworms, and they're one of the most common fish that beginners keep. And I'm guessing that very few beginners actually feed them frozen bloodworms. So, frozen foods in general, if you do a little more research, are great in a lot of different forms for a lot of different fish. But one thing I'm going to say in particular is if you have Cory catfish, feed them frozen bloodworms. It will do wonders for their health. And you may even see them breeding if you keep the water clean enough and feed them frequently enough. So yeah, frozen foods, do more research. They're a game changer. Number two would be sponge filters. Now, when you get in... excuse me, when you get into the aquarium hobby, I think a lot of people will start out with some sort of kit aquarium. They might buy like an Acreon kit, and it comes with a hang-on back filter, and they just never really realize that there are other filter alternatives. And the biggest reason why I think implementing a sponge filter really upgrades what you're doing is sponge filters don't suck up baby fish and grind them up in an impeller, which can happen and does happen frequently with power filters. So especially if you're keeping like live bears as one of your first fish, you might be questioning, why do I not see any babies? Everyone online is saying live bears are so easy to breed, but I never see any babies. It's very possible that your power filter is just sucking them all up and they're all getting killed before you can even see them. So I would recommend getting a sponge filter. And what comes with getting a sponge filter is it probably doesn't make sense to buy that kit because a lot of the money you're spending is on that power filter. I think it's a much better decision to buy a tank individually with no items with it, and then buy a sponge filter, an air pump, a heater, a lid for the aquarium, and all those other supplies separately. It might cost you a little more money, but you'll be able to get exactly what you want, and you won't be stuck with that power filter that, for one thing, grinds up baby fish. For another thing, doesn't filter your tank as well as a sponge filter, in my opinion. And for a third thing, costs you money when you either have to buy cartridges for it or costs you time because it's a pain in the butt to service once a month. Where a sponge filter, if you look up a video of how to clean a sponge filter, it takes a little bit of time, but it's a much easier and less headache-filled process. Okay, moving on to number 3, water testing and water changes. So when I started keeping fish, I guess I don't know what other people do, but when I started keeping fish, I was too little to have a phone, and I didn't Google stuff on the internet on my computer that much. So I was kind of just getting all my information from the guy at the fish store. And one thing that kind of slipped through the cracks is I don't think I ever really changed water. I would just watch it evaporate and fill it up a little bit and think, oh, that counts as a water change. Not really realizing that that's absolutely not what a water change is. It also never really crossed my mind to test the water. So I actually didn't kill that many fish in the beginning, the first couple years I kept aquariums, but I think that was just because I had so few fish and I was able to get away with a lot of bad practices without any consequences. So one problem with testing water is it is pretty expensive. An API master test kit runs somewhere between like $30 and $40 usually, which is a decent amount of money. But what I would say is when you buy that kit, there's so much testing solution in there that it'll last you for probably 5 to 10 years, if not more, depending how many tanks you have and how frequently you test water. But it's really important to have that so when something does go wrong, you know what to do. The key one, pH, is the main thing I test. It's the main thing that shifts at the most rapid rate. And I've found that generally if something's wrong and I don't know what it is, I'll test the pH and it'll say, oh, the pH has dropped too much. I should probably change some water and maybe try to increase the buffering capacity of my water. So in general, I would just say buying a test kit the day you buy your first aquarium is a great idea. You can use it for the duration of the time you keep fish, and it'll be a good investment because it'll keep you from killing fish and it'll help you stay more in tune with the water conditions in your aquarium. Okay, moving on to number 4, researching before you buy. Now, one thing that I do now that's much different from when I first started keeping fish is when I go into a fish store, I know these are the 3 fish that I am looking for. And if I don't see them, I'm not buying anything. And sometimes I break that rule if I happen to see a fish that's really nice and I have a brand new aquarium with no fish in it and I'm trying to decide what to keep. I might spontaneously purchase a fish I wasn't planning on purchasing. However, I do not buy fish without having an understanding of what conditions they need to survive and what type of care they will require once I have them. So I guess a lot of beginners will probably go into a fish store, and if they're new, they'll ask the store owner. They'll say, I'm new to fish keeping. It's my first tank. What fish do you recommend I get? And in general, that's not a bad idea. The only problem is people ask that question and then they'll buy that fish that day, which generally, if you didn't know about that fish walking into the store, I think it's a pretty dangerous game to just buy it off one recommendation without doing any further research. So what I recommend you do is watch a few videos online of people recommending like beginner fish. Like for me, the white cloud mountain minnow, I think is probably the easiest fish to keep that I've ever had. It can fit in any tank, probably 4 gallons or larger. So if you're going into a store looking for a beginner fish, that's the one fish that I would, if I was the store owner, I'd be like, take this fish home. I'd bet a lot of money you won't kill it unless you do something ridiculous. And the problem is a lot of times looking at a fish, you have no idea how hard it is to keep. Like my favorite fish to keep is a German blue ram. And I didn't keep a single German blue ram for 2 years after knowing what they were because of how much the internet hypes up how hard it is to keep them alive. And it is really hard to keep them alive. But I guess there's a healthy balance. You have to understand the internet can give you either a bad taste in your mouth that, oh, that fish is so hard to keep, I don't want to even try. But it can also keep you prepared so that you don't buy something and kill it, not realizing I'm not ready to keep that fish. Like discus, for instance. I've never kept discus, mainly because I've never had a tank large enough to keep them the way I'd like to keep them, but also because they're really expensive and considered very difficult to keep. And then I'll watch people who just got their first aquarium, but they have a lot of money, and the first thing they put in is discus, and they die. And then the people act dumbfounded, like, why did my fish die? So I don't know. Some people can do that and happen to have success keeping discus, and that can happen with a lot of difficult to keep fish. But in general, I would just say it's important to really research the fish you're going to keep before you keep it in order to have the best chances possible of it surviving. Okay. Kind of going along with that, I don't think it's going to be that big a point, but you need to have patience and confidence when keeping fish. So if you get a new aquarium and you set it up today, a lot of people will say, oh, if you put dechlorinator in and you put this startup bacteria in, you can stock the tank today. And in some cases that might be true, but you have to be reasonable. How much of a loss is it going to be if you wait a week, or instead of putting all the fish in right away, you just put in 10% of the fish you're going to end up keeping in that aquarium to allow some beneficial bacteria to get going? It's just kind of, and I run into this too because I want to get new fish. I want to like level up my hobby as much as I can, as fast as I can. But when you do that too quickly, you end up killing fish. And another point I'm going to cover after this one, I'll just kind of lay it in with this one, is you're going to kill fish. It's inevitable. So don't get too worried about it. It's really, if you do something really reckless and kill your fish, I feel bad when I do that. And I feel like everyone should feel bad if they kill the fish that they really could have prevented from dying if they thought more about what they were doing. But you can't live in fear of killing fish. You're going to kill some along the way, learning how to keep them. And ultimately, as long as you learn something from every mistake, I don't get too hung up on it. It is a life. It's important to value life of any animal. But as long as you're doing your best, you're gonna suffer mistakes and you're gonna have successes. And that's just kind of the way it is. I guess the seventh point I want to make is bigger tanks are less maintenance. So a lot of times people start out with a 10-gallon aquarium. That's kind of the basic aquarium that everyone has. And that's fine. That's what I started out with. And I had a pretty decent time. But what I didn't realize was when I finally upgraded from a 10-gallon aquarium to a 55-gallon aquarium, I think that was maybe 5 years into keeping fish, the amount of work to keep it clean went down by a lot. Because there's just so much more water volume, there's so much more space for the fish waste to go in, that unless you stock the tank like crazy, it's not going to be as much work as a much smaller aquarium. So that's just so that new fish keepers understand. It might seem intimidating, like, oh, you have this big tank, it looks like so much work. But anytime people ask me how often, like, is it hard to maintain your aquariums? It really isn't. If you want to be lazy, you can do like one water change, one cleaning every 2 months, and you'll be fine. It really is just dependent on how many fish you keep in your aquarium and how much you feed them. So if you want a really easy aquarium that doesn't require a lot of maintenance, just don't stock it that heavily and don't feed it like crazy. If you want to crank out fish and breed them as fast as possible and grow them, you're going to have a lot more work on your hands. You're going to be doing a lot of maintenance. Like this tank right here is going to need a pretty deep cleaning pretty soon because there's a lot of fish poop on the bottom, and the sponge filter is getting pretty clogged up. But I'm okay with that. I'm trying to grow the Celosi as fast as I possibly can and get them breeding. So really, the size of the tank has nothing to do with the maintenance. It's all about how many fish you have. And if you have the same amount of fish in a 10-gallon versus a larger aquarium, the larger aquarium will be less work. Okay, so last point, live plants. Live plants are something that I think a lot of times people don't consider because their local store doesn't have them, or the local store doesn't really advertise that, oh, this is something that could actually really help your tank. And if you don't know, the main thing about live plants is they'll pull nitrates out of your water when they grow. So basically the whole point of water changes is to remove nitrates from your water. And plants do that for free. So if you have enough plants, you almost don't have to do water changes. You do have to monitor things like pH because over time it will usually drop, and replacing water will kind of offset that change. But in general, the plants just make your life easier, make the tank look better. Baby fish can hide in them. Some fish, like the Celosi, will eat this plant up here. And I also have a plant growing out of the aquarium there, which is also removing nitrates. Yeah, so in general, I'll just list a couple plants that I think are good for beginners. I think Java moss is probably the easiest plant of all time. If you have any form of light on your tank whatsoever, you can put it in and it should do well. Java fern is also pretty easy. Anubias is pretty easy, although it grows slow, so I wouldn't rely on it to remove a whole lot of nitrate. Duckweed is a nuisance, but it's really easy and it removes a lot of contaminants from your water. But be aware, once you introduce it, it will be like impossible to get rid of, and it covers the surface of the water, which, depending on what you might like that. You might think you like that, like I have in the past, and then once it's there for years, you just hate it. But yeah, live plants are a really great way to lessen your workload and make your tank look better. And I think just beginners don't always consider them that much and don't really realize there's something that could be implemented so easily. So that's the end of my list. If you have any ideas for other things that could be added to that list, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. I'm also going to link the Aquarium Co-op forum in the description. It's an online forum that I go to when I encounter a question that I don't know the answer to while fish keeping. Yeah. And I decided to do this video today because I do have some developments going on in the other tanks, but I didn't think it was quite worthy of a full video. I'm hoping next week I'll actually have some baby Celosi to show you. So yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you next week, and I appreciate you being here. Leave a like, comment, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I'll catch you in the next one.